The 20th century was faced with critical events that define what we now live in the present. It was a time period where political, historical, cultural, and social events were held. Technological advances, catastrophic events, and crucial people developed in this time period. This century faced huge impact towards consequences of the Second World War, the collapse of empires, the beginning of world crises, and the rise of first world countries. To examine this period of time that faced many events, we will go through it from all the beginning.
The 20th century started with sad news. The Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom had died, but not everything was bad. On America, the Republic of Cuba was born after their independence from the United States, and do not forget Panama, which also won their independence from Colombia. Alliances started to form in Europe, like the Anglo-Japanese Alliance in 1902, that was signed in London by Lord Lansdowne, a British secretary and the Emperor of Japan Meiji, whose reign was transformed from feudal country into modern world. Wars continue all across the world, like the Russo-Japanese War over imperial ambitions or the Russian Revolution led by Lenin, a Russian revolutionary with Marxist ideas that looked to throw Nicholas II, the last Tsar of Russia, out of power. The Mexican Revolution also started against Porfirio Diaz, who had been overpowered for over 30 years. The first armed movement was led by Francisco I. Madero, a revolutionary that wrote La Sucesión Presidencial, which was a document against the dictator, who died in the episode known as the Ten Tragic Days. Pancho Villa, el caudillo del norte, took his command in the North Division. In China, there was also a revolution that led to the proclamation of the First Republic of China, with Sun Yat-sen, who was a leader of the revolution, as president. On Europe, one of the deadliest conflicts began, the World War I, which ended with the victory of the Allies. In the east, the Ottoman Empire was starting a revolt over Palestine with the objective of creating an Arab state. In 1920, the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution became law, and women will have the right to vote. 1 year after, while the Mongolian Revolution took place, creating the Mongolian People's Republic, in China, the Communist Party of China was founded by Li Dezhou, whose philosophy was based on Chinese tradition, and Chen Duxiu. Both are considered one of the founding fathers of the CPC. With only 7 years transcurred, the Huang Gutung incident happened, leading to trouble between China and Japan. On Italy and in many countries, socialism started spreading, making Benito Mussolini rise to power. Getting back to America, in the 30s, the Great Depression began, making the fall in national income, tax revenue profits, and prices. Finally, Hitler gained popularity, and in 1934, he became president of Germany.
In the 1930s, a period of extreme persecution and oppression in the Soviet Union was starting. The Great Purge, one of the reasons was the desire to eliminate the communists and strengthen Stalin, who was the general of the communists and had the maximum charge of the Bolsheviks. In Japan, the beginnings of a war were clear, since Hirohito, the 124th Emperor of Japan, and his Japanese army initiated an invasion of the north and east of China. In Europe, the Spanish Civil War was starting with confrontations of the Republicans and Nationalists. With the victory of the Nationalists, the dictatorship of Francisco Franco, a Spanish dictator who gave the cup against the democratic government, finished. World War II began when Germany, led by Hitler, the totalitarian regime leader known as Nazi Germany, invaded Poland. At the beginning of the 40s, Ho Chi Minh, the president of the Communist Party of Vietnam, established the Vietnamese Revolutionary Youth Association to create the Communist Party of Vietnam. In the same year, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, making the United States declare war. Between Roosevelt and Churchill, the First Minister of the United Kingdom, leader during the Second World War, signed a document named the Atlantic Charter, in which both nations affirmed a certain common goal in which the nation policy is respective territory. 2 years after, the most bloody war considered in history took place, the Stalingrad Battle, in which the Red Army defeated the Nazis, representing the end of Nazism. In 1945, the USA dropped the bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, ordered by Harry Truman. At the same time in America, the elections ended with Truman as the President of the United States from 1945 to 1953. In May, Germany surrendered, and in the same year, China, France, Soviet Union, United Kingdom, United States, among other nations, signed a letter to create officially the United Nations in October. Then, 1948, a civil war broke between Jews and Arabs, Jews led by David Ben-Gurion, the creator of the State of Israel, who focused on the reconstruction of the country, declared the Tel Aviv the creation of the State of Israel. On 1951, 49 nations signed the Japanese Peace Treaty in San Francisco, officially ending World War II. At the beginning of the 60s, the conflict between communists and the Allies were increased at the point that Germany remained divided in two zones by the construction of a wall in Berlin. The Federal Republic and Democratic Republic for the United States news weren't so good. Then, in November, Kennedy was mortally wounded by shotguns. Then, he contributed to the Bay of Pigs invasion, the missile crisis in Cuba, the construction of the Berlin Wall, and the African American civil rights movement.
On June 1972, some documents were stolen of the Democratic National Committee, and it was discovered that the team sent to steal the documents was from the president. This event was called the Watergate Scandal. In August 1974, after his role in the Watergate conspiracy had finally come to the light, the President Nixon became the first president to resign. A year later, an attempt by Khmer Rouge leader Pol Pot to form a communist society resulted in a lot of deaths in the Cambodian genocide. In the same year, the Lebanon Civil War took place. This civil war lasted 20 years and it resulted in 250 million fatalities approximated. A year later, after the war started in Cuba, the Prime Minister, Fidel Castro, had become the president, becoming a one-party communist state. A year later, in 1977, Pope John Paul II made history by becoming the first non-Italian pope in more than 400 years. An operating system was founded by Bill Gates in 1975, and in April 1st of 1976, Apple Company was officially founded by the famous inventor Steve Jobs. Years later, in 1979, the Iranian Revolution took place, in which popular uprising in Iran resulted in a toppling of the monarchy, and led to the establishment of an Islamic Republic, where Ayatollah Khamenei became the supreme religious leader of the Islamic Republic. On 1979, a group of followers of religious leader invaded the U.S. Embassy in Tehran and seized 60 Americans, 52 of whom remained 444 days. On 1981, in St. Peter's Square at Vatican City, the Pope was shot and wounded while he was entering the square. The Chernobyl disaster was a catastrophic nuclear accident that occurred in 1986 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. An explosion and fire released large quantities of radioactive particles into the atmosphere, which spread over nearby countries. The year of 1989 marks the infamous fall of the Berlin Wall, where crusted crowns began to climb on top of the wall and destroy segments of the concrete fort. Germany finally reunited. In 1990, in Poland, Lech Walesa, founder of the Solidarity Trade Union, becomes the first directly elected Polish leader. The collapse of the Soviet Union started in the late 80s and was complete when the country broke up into 15 independent states on December 25 from 1991. This signaled the end of the Cold War between the Soviet Union and United States. In 1993, the World Trade Center was bombed in a terrorist attack in New York City. Israel's division turned to the dark side of Jewish terrorists can be marked by the murder of Prime Minister Rabin. Finally, in 1995, a couple years later, a sad event happened, which was the death of Princess Diana, a beloved woman in a car crash in Paris.
The events of the 20th century have led us to this day. All the advances, in all fields, had improved what is now our life. Technology makes working and to getting information so much easier. Also, communication has improved. Even all the wars have led to an improvement. The UN, for example, is an organization to keep peace with over 100 countries that are members. This would have never been created if the wars have not happened. If the atomic bomb have never been deployed, we would not know the impact and the power of these weapons, which led to the creation of defenses and treaties to avoid using all these weapons. So, after the 20th century, we faced a lot of advances, many wars, massive killing, and a lot of issues, which showed us important lessons to avoid doing the mistakes of the future and to help us to keep moving forward, innovating, creating, and trying to make this world a better world.